Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Character Clinic. I'm Haley,
And I'm Karla.
and we are licensed therapists here to talk about the most relatable fictional characters and ways that we might work with them. And today, we are going to be talking about the world of Harry Potter.
I'm really excited about it.
It's going to be really, really fun, I think. And this is going to be one just like previous ones we've had where we can revisit the series at a later time or with different characters, that kind of a thing. But would you like to tell us a little bit about your experience with Harry Potter?
Yes, so I have watched the movies. I've watched the movies a few times, and I read the book. I read the first book pretty recently. That's my experience with the series. How about you?
I have been, I started reading them in fourth grade when I was 9 years old, and I have been like viciously consuming those books ever since then. I would go to the midnight release parties every time
Oh,
and get
wow.
the new book. So they've always been a big deal to. I can't even tell you how many times I've read that series all the way through. And then of course seen the movies several times and would go to the midnight release of the movies too. So it was both. I loved both the books and the movies for this series.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Also very excited to report that I finished One Piece. Okay, I need to come back from that. That's a bold statement.
Oh,
I finished
yes.
the live action, the
Yes.
first season of the live action.
Yeah.
So I will be watching the anime, but that is something that we'll definitely be getting to do an episode on probably pretty soon. Oh, it's definitely Luffy. Like I love everything about his attitude. I don't even know if I can yet put it into words, but the way that he's just so positive all the time and there's certainly a limit to how much that can become tolerable in real life. And there is such a thing as toxic positivity. But the way that he is not kind of in that way, like he isn't just like, oh no, things are going to go my way and it's all going to be fine and we don't have to worry about it. So just cheer up and get over it.
Uh-huh.
Instead, he works with what is present and he's like, okay, so that's how this is going to go. That's a change, but we can roll with it.
Yes.
It's actually very adaptive, the way that he is, very cheerful as opposed to being too rigid, which is often the problem. So I really enjoyed that. There's not a single character that I haven't been absolutely intrigued by and excited by. Even just in this one season of the live action, it's already shown so much character development for everyone. It's been absolutely fantastic. I'm definitely very partial to Nami and Zoro as well. Very excited to see the continuation of their stories. But like literally you can name any character from that show and I'd be like, yes, I love them.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would say Luffy is also my favorite character in the live action. Um, I do like that they give everybody backstories, but that's something that is very common in the anime. So there are people who you would think, people and non-humans as well, who you would think would not have a backstory or like any character development because they seem so insignificant in the grand scheme of things of the anime. And then seasons later, so like, if you think about how the anime was made years later, they come back and then you're like, what? That character that was in one scene is like, has character development? Like, how are they? So it's, yeah, so it tracks that they gave everybody some backstory in the live action.
That's awesome. And now it starts to make sense why it's so long when they really just delve into all of the different perspectives and show. I think that's something that is so important because it really helps us take that step back and realize that in real life, no matter how insignificantly it feels that a random stranger might influence your life for just a moment, like they also have their own entire life going on. And so with everybody in their life, like it is something that I feel like sometimes we all need to be reminded about.
Yeah, for sure. So we definitely will be doing an episode on One Piece hopefully soon. And yeah, so I don't know where I was going with that, but I guess we can go ahead and get started. Well, actually, I guess I'll ask you, if you had any positives for, I'm a little tongue-tied right now, if you had any highlights of your week, or did you have any highlights of your week this week?
I don't think so. A very typical week. Nope. Did you have any highlights of your week this week?
I mean, same here, just some repairs. Like right now, we have, there's a person over who's helping with some, with our sprinklers because they're messed up. So, yeah, just some typical repair things that have come up. So nothing really to report this week.
That's fun. Yeah. I started on, those little like book nooks that are like little wooden dioramas that are tiny.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I don't know. I just said yes, but I don't know what that is.
Never mind. I might have to show you like a picture or something, but it's basically a extremely tedious craft. Like you are creating a dollhouse from scratch, including like you get clay to mold little cement and that kind of a thing. And mine is like, there's tons of them out there, but mine is like a little coffee shop. I'm making a tiny diorama of a coffee shop, basically.
Yeah.
And I've had the box for it for a long time, months. And I finally started on it yesterday. So that's exciting.
Oh, that is exciting.
It's going to take me months to do, but it'll be fun.
Yeah, it's a good like a good self-care thing, when things are really difficult at work or outside of work and you just need something to focus on for a little while. I imagine that can be really fun and helpful.
Yeah, exactly. So there is that. A little bit about our episode for today before we jump into our intake. So to be clear, we are going to do our usual thing where we'll have a role play for an intake appointment. Karla's going to be our counselor. I'm going to be the client for today. We are going to be focusing very specifically on the second book or movie, Chamber of Secrets. And so when it becomes clear who this character is to you, then keep in mind that the way that we are talking about this character is the way that we are talking about them as they are in Chamber of Secrets before anything else has happened to them.
Yep. Okay.
Right.
So we can go ahead and get started with our intake.
Sounds good.
Okay. So what brings you into counseling today?
I got detention and my parents thought I should come here to make sure that I don't get detention, which is it's not a concern. I will make sure I don't get detention again. I can already make sure of that. The teachers love me anyway. It's not going to be a problem.
So you feel like you shouldn't be here?
Well, I don't mind being here. I mean, my parents want me to come, so I come. But I'm just not worried that it'll continue to be a problem. I will just make sure that it's not a problem.
Okay. Yeah. So now that you know it's a problem, you can make sure to not do whatever got you into detention again?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they tell me not to get detention again, I will just not.
Okay. So tell me about what got you into detention.
There was this girl that is just running her mouth like she tends to do. And I just said something to shut her up. And everyone was very upset by it. And that's fine. I just won't say that in public anymore.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you said bothered people.
I guess. I mean, they sent me to detention over it. So I guess they are bothered by it. But it's not like nobody says it.
Yeah. So you don't think it's that serious?
No. I mean, they probably just need a safe face, They're not really thinking that I'm any kind of problem. They just have to do it.
I see. So you feel like they might be kind of fake outraged.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes the most sense to me. But
okay.
They all love me, really.
Okay. So then what's bringing you into counseling is you got in trouble, you had detention, and your parents wanted you to come here. Why did they think counseling might be helpful? Did they say?
Not really. They just thought you might kind of give me a talking to, I guess. But I promise, I get it. I know everything's fine. And I know that it will not be a problem from here on forward. So, like, you don't have to worry. I've got it handled.
So correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like your parents were thinking that in here, I would just maybe tell you not to do that again, and then we'd be good.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how they handle things. Just like, don't do that and then move on.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, like, listen, my parents are really important people. And obviously, if I'm going to grow up and follow in their footsteps, then I need to, like, talk the talk too, you know? And so they have a lot of rules, and it's important that I follow the rules and that I, like, represent the family well. And so I, sometimes I make mistakes and I own up to that, like, that I do, because my father definitely lets me know when I do, but at the same time, like, I'm not going to go around bragging that I make mistakes. So, it's important to maintain the image of the family name and the reputation. And so I'm not in public going to go around and be like, oh, I made a mistake. But, like, I internally acknowledge it and then I move on.
Mm-hmm. So you just learned to not do it again.
Yeah. Like, they just told me you can't do that. And I know, there's nothing that's more important than following along in my father's footsteps. So I'm going to do what he says.
It sounds like you have an image to maintain. And I imagine that can be stressful.
I mean, yeah, it is really stressful. I imagine that it might be a little hard for other people like you, no offense or anything, to understand. But I mean, yeah, it is pretty stressful. I don't really expect many other people to understand, even you, like, no offense or anything. But, like, it's just, we do have a reputation. Our family name really holds a lot of weight. It matters a lot. We have a lot of power. And we are an upstanding, long-lasting family. People know our name. And we have this image to maintain and this reputation to maintain, and I work hard to do that and to live up to that, because that's everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it must be really isolating. I mean, you're absolutely right. There aren't a lot of people who would understand that. And, you're right. I wouldn't be able to relate. And so I imagine that not having a lot of your peers that can relate, it must be isolating.
I guess. I mean, sure. But, I mean, I have friends. I have 2 kind of idiot friends that just follow me around everywhere and do every single thing that I say. And so, like I said, people do love me. And I have people around me all the time. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, yes, in terms of actual peers and people that really get what it's like, mm-hmm. Maybe not. But I have my mom and dad, and that's what matters.
Okay. So you mentioned your friends. I'm curious, do you feel like you and your friends are equal? Do you feel like do you respect them? Do they respect you?
Well, they respect me. Absolutely, they do. I enforce that perfectly well.
I mean by that?
I respect them. I mean, they're kind of dumb, so it's like, it would be kind of silly for me to, like, respect them, but they do their jobs well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned that they do their jobs well and that you enforce that. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, like, they kind of back me up, like, they are there to support. And so if I need anything, if some idiot is running their mouth, then they're there right behind me, backing me up, standing with me, which is what, they're supposed to do as my friends.
Yeah. Sounds like they're good friends.
Sure. I mean, like I said, they do their jobs.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about school.
School's fine. Um, my parents just hate this school, but there's not a whole lot of other options. So, like, I guess they keep telling me that the administration is just terrible and like everything's so backwards here. And sometimes I do think that I'm not like treated with the respect that I might expect. So there's some things that are kind of wrong about this place. I feel like there's got to be some better place out there that I could be going, but I know that also if there was, I would be there. So it's just kind of frustrating. But I mean, it's fine. Like I know that there's teachers that love me, and so that goes pretty well. And I think I do a good job of like getting into the places that I need to be, you know? I have finally been recognized for my athletic ability, and I finally got on the team, the school team, my house team. So that is, I've worked so hard for that one, like harder than I've worked for anything. And they finally like recognized that. And it was honestly about time. So honestly, it's even a lot better now that I'm on the team, getting to do like the thing that I really want to do. So that's great.
Yeah, so it sounds like getting on the team was really important to you. And
Yeah.
I noticed that you smiled when you were talking about it. How did it feel to get on the team?
Well, great. You know, it feels good when you're finally recognized for what you've been working on this whole time. And it's like, hello, I have been here. I cannot believe you wouldn't notice me and how fitting I am for this role. And they finally did. And it's like, I just waited forever for that. And it finally paid off. And like, it was really annoying, but also like good that they finally did recognize it. Really annoying, especially because like they recognized other people getting into a similar role that definitely did not deserve it, did not earn it, did not work for it like I did. And so that was ridiculous. But it was even more annoying, I'd say. So even better than when they finally did put me on the team.
Yeah, so it sounds like you noticed that some people might have gotten in either unfairly or without doing as much work or putting in as much work as you did, and that's really frustrating to you?
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? Like, I grew up practicing Quidditch, knowing Quidditch. I grew up practicing it. This has been my life. I grew up in a good wizarding family. I have been preparing for this for years. And then imagine some kid that didn't even know that you could fly on a broomstick until last year, and he's on the team? Ridiculous. He has not put in the years of practice and knowledge on this that I have. And so it is absolutely insane. And that is what pissed me off so much about that girl, is like she was saying the opposite. She was saying that he deserved his spot and that I didn't deserve mine. Ridiculous. I've never been so angry.
Yeah. I mean, it must have been hurtful to hear that.
Well, made me angry, that's for sure.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more. So you've mentioned your family, but tell me more about them. Give me some more details.
Well, there's my mom and my dad, and that's really it. It's just three of us, and the three of us are really close. My grandfather is a really, really influential figure as well, but I don't really see him quite as much. It's mostly just like me and my mom and my dad, but we spend all of our time together, and we do everything together. And so we're really, really close. And like anytime there's some nonsense at the school or something like that, my dad is there to back me up. And people are like scared of him. Like, if I suggest that my dad's gonna know about some shit that they're pulling, they run from that. So, you know, I only whip that out when I absolutely have to. But if I need to remind people about how seriously they need to take my dad, it works. So there's that. Sometimes we have like distant cousins come hang out. Actually, kind of a lot of like, I don't know, distant cousins or like family friends who like they'll come over, and my mom and dad will go into like our conference office with them, and I'm not really allowed to sit in on those meetings very much. But that happens a lot. So I just have like all of these random like non-technically related aunts and uncles kind of a thing. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm hearing about your family that you're very close and that it sounds like you're very proud to be a member of your family.
oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Well, it is a lot to live up to, but I think I'm doing a pretty good job of it. I'm putting a lot of work into maintaining this family image because it's a good family. And it's a family that is very upstanding, very well known, and very important. That's the main thing. Like the family is very, very important. And so it's my job to make sure that I live up to that. And I work every day to make sure that I do. And that is really what keeps me going. That's everything to me.
Yeah. Okay. So what your family's values are, you have those same values.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I may not know a lot about what goes on in those conference meetings with people, but anything my dad reminds me that we value makes sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever explored or thought about those values more deeply?
What do you mean?
Like, what's a value that is really important to your family?
Mm, definitely family and having like the right kind of family, having the right amount of influence in the government, being, one of the better families as opposed to like one of the families that is just, associating with like wrong kinds of people and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So have you ever thought about why associating with the wrong kinds of people, like why that's important to you?
Well, they'll bring our image down, and dad doesn't like that.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like that's really important to him.
Yeah, I mean, anything that's important to my dad is important to me. I
Yeah.
mean, could you imagine if I ever was like, oh no, I don't agree, dad, like the treatment that I would get would be worse than the house elf. It would be crazy. So, no.
Yeah. Well, how does the house elf get treated?
Oh, well, like a house elf, like he's always messing up. And so, like, he gets a good, like, swift kick in the right direction, has to happen a lot.
Yeah. So then, of course, you wouldn't want to mess up. You wouldn't want to be treated like that.
Exactly. Because I'm not a house elf. I am a member of this family, and I'm going to make my dad proud. And that's it. End of discussion. Like, it's not a question. It's not up for debate. Like, that's going to be how it is. It just has to be.
Yeah. Okay. So what are things that you enjoy?
Quidditch.
What else?
I don't. I mean, what else is there? Like, what else needs to be? When people recognize my talent, that's nice.
Okay. If, it sounds like you've got things under control, like you will never say what you said again or whatever happened again in public.
Not in public. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have to continue coming here, what would you like to work on? Well, I know you said that you're okay with coming here, especially if your parents want you to come here. What would you like to work on?
Well, I imagine my dad probably like told you some stuff to work on. So just like whatever he said is fine.
Okay. Well, let's say that he didn't. What would you like to work on?
I think that's a little confusing to me.
Okay. Let's say, how about this? Let's say that your dad said, ask him what he wants to work on. This is his space. What would you want to work on?
I could not imagine him saying that. Maybe how frustrating it is when other people just piss me off. Sometimes that can be really annoying to have to deal with. So maybe dealing with that.
Okay.
Especially because when I do get pissed off, then that's when I'm more likely to like say the things my dad wouldn't want me to say. And so if we work on that, then maybe I won't do that. And then maybe like I'll never get detention. My dad won't have to be upset with me. Like that's perfect. That's probably the right answer.
Okay. So that's the right answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's definitely something that we can explore and that we can process.
Great.
Do you have any questions for me before we finish today?
Yeah. What are your credentials?
Yeah. You're curious about how qualified I am to be doing this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Very important.
I think my dad picked you, so I'm sure that you're great. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah. So I'm a licensed professional counselor. I've got a master's in counseling, and I've got a lot of experience in seeing a lot of different people, but I definitely have an area of specialty, and I have a few years of experience.
Okay. And like, what are your political beliefs?
You're curious about me.
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Well, my father says we shouldn't associate with the wrong kind of people.
Yeah. Yeah. So you want to make sure
so he probably vetted you first.
Yeah, so you want to make sure I'm the right kind of person. And if I'm the right kind of person, I imagine that it would make it a lot easier to engage in therapy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I tend to not really disclose my political beliefs. It's just a lot of times it can get in the way of counseling. And so I hope you're okay with this, but I'd feel more comfortable to not disclose.
Kind of makes it seem like you have something to hide or something. But like I said, I'm sure that my father vetted you, whether you know it or not. So I guess that's fine.
Okay. Well, it was really nice meeting you, and I will see you next week.
Okay.
All right. Whether you know it or you knew it or not, that got me. I was like, did he do a background check on me?
Exactly. Like technically voting records are public records, so if someone knows how to get to them, they could.
Right.
My God, there were so many times that I almost busted out laughing. I'd have to like watch it back to see, but anytime I said anything ridiculous, which was almost every time.
You're like, what are your political beliefs? I'm like, what? But you know what? Some teens will really ask that.
Yeah, they will. I have had, and I love this, just to state for the record, I love when people come in like really, really prepared. And I'm also not saying you have to come in super prepared, but I'm not put off by it, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Yeah. But I've had some people, and they have been like teenagers or young adults for the most part, come in with a list of questions that they got from the internet somewhere.
Oh, that's good.
Like, yeah, it was like a list of like things to ask your therapist in a consultation or things to check with your therapist about, and I was really impressed by that. I thought that was pretty cool. So there have been times that I've been tasked with certain questions like, what would your reaction be if I said this? Or like, what are your thoughts on this kind of? I've never had anyone specifically be like, what are your political beliefs? I've had people talk about their experiences with like the political climate, and then they would acknowledge like, and I'm not sure what you believe, but blah, 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 and so I've had people kind of just acknowledge that there's a chance that it's different. But then I've had people pick very specific issues in politics that they wanted to talk about and bring that up. And instead of asking me my general political beliefs, they've asked me like, okay, what's your stance on this? I need to know how you would react to this. And in those moments, because in those particular situations, it was directly relevant to what we needed to talk about for it, I did disclose for them like how I would react if a client brought that up, that kind of thing. So there are definitely times it's more and less helpful in the room to talk about those things. And in that case with Draco, he really was just being like, are you good enough kind of a thing. But that was great. And I I love this. I think I need to start using this with my clients in session more, this role-playing thing, and
Uh-huh.
have them take on a role of someone in their life that is just hard to understand and have like all role play is them,
Yeah.
because every time I do this, I learn more about that character just from
Uh-huh.
like imagining what they would say. And we talked about this for, a little while before we started recording, and we had planned out certain things that Draco would be talking about and like his characterization. I guess that's the reveal. We were talking about Draco Malfoy.
Oh, that's right.
If it wasn't clear by then, I'm pretty sure it was very clear at that point.
Yes. So the person I was doing the intake with was, in fact, Mr. Draco Malfoy.
Yes. And I think several of the things that we had talked about in preparation for recording for today absolutely came up. Like, we couldn't have prepared for his characterization. But at the same time, on the spot, like, we don't script out our role plays. We talk about and brainstorm a few of the questions we want to ask, a few of the points we want to bring up, a few of the characterizations we want to make clear, but we don't actually plan out our questions and answers. And even though we usually come up with a list of questions, just like I'm sure in the actual therapy room, we end up deviating from those because you just start to go with how the conversation is naturally going and like what comes up as you're talking. And so there's a lot of stuff that we don't plan in. So in the moment when I'm thinking of what I'm going to say next, according to this character, it surprises me sometimes what I realize in that moment about the motivations. And so I thought that was a fantastic intake for book 2, movie 2, Draco. And of course, I think it would be really fascinating to do it again after the 6th book, kind of a thing. Because he goes through a lot of change. He becomes a lot more aware of things going on. Even his whole family goes through changes. I mean, of course. But it's very interesting to see, especially when we highlight a character that's not automatically good and we focus on some of their motivations. I think that's always a fun thing. And I think that's why a lot of people are really interested in things like true crime, because it's very fascinating to get inside the mind of someone that is really hurtful to other people. Like, why would you do that? And then we learn that sometimes there are reasons, not that justifies it, but they have their own internal motivations that make sense to them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm curious if, as you were playing Draco, if there were any questions that caught you off guard that you were like why? Like, I'm shook.
I think from like, even though I was playing Draco from a therapist perspective, the questions that you asked were exactly what I would have expected, especially the ones where it was like, okay, but what would you want to do? I was like, yes, of course, you need to ask that. That is exactly what I would have done. Or it's like, he's clearly trying to live so hard for this image and not even thinking about who he is really. But I think for Draco, that was like, what are you talking about? Nobody asks me that,
Yeah.
So it's definitely, that is a conversation I've genuinely had with some of my clients. I have some teenage clients that literally asking them what they think about their home, their family, their goals, their schedules, what they do with their lives completely takes them off guard. Like, why are you asking me that? I've never been asked that, and I've never even considered it. It's pretty wild how commonly that happens, actually.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I've seen that happen a lot in therapy as well. And it's also something that teens have to learn just as through being teenagers, or something that they start to learn as teenagers is, oh, I have my own voice. And so even if Draco didn't care so much about what his parents, specifically his dad, thought, he might still have found himself following a lot or saying a lot of the things that he said, just because, when you're a teen, you're kind of in this process of growing, and then you start to question, and then you form your own thoughts and beliefs. But for Draco, it might be a lot more difficult to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I think it is a very typical teen experience. I love Erik Erikson and the theory of psychosocial development, where the focus on the crisis, the developmental crisis that you're going through, in adolescence is identity versus role confusion. You're trying to figure out like who you are. And it's like you genuinely at that age come into this understanding of like, oh, wait, I am a person, a whole person all by myself. And I get to start to try and figure out who am I that might be separate from my parents or from my peers or from my experiences or from my society. And so when I mentioned that I have a lot of teens that kind of are surprised to go down that road, it's not even because I have a lot of teens that have like families like the Malfoys. It's because sometimes we learn we're supposed to be a certain way from our parents. Sometimes we learn it from our peers. Sometimes we learn it from like experiences of being bullied, being like mocked for not being like other people in any given way. Sometimes it's societal pressure of like, you're supposed to do it this way. And it's definitely a really, really typical life experience in adolescence.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious what your short-term goals would be when working with Draco.
I think one of the things that you mentioned in the intake, one of the things that we touched on a little bit would absolutely be helping him think about what are some things that he enjoys doing, helping him inch towards the long-term goal of who am I, separate from what other people expect of me, but doing so in the short term by kind of focusing on, okay, what are some things that make you happy? Not make your father happy, but you happy. And like, it's fine if those two things overlap, but it's also fine if they don't. And figuring out like, what are some things that you would enjoy doing. I would also really want to work with him on some pretty basic social skills, being able to work on basic empathy skills so that he can, I mean, we can't hide the fact that in this point in this series, he is a villainous character. Voldemort's not even back yet, you know, so he is one of the main villains right now. And so he's mean and he's superior and he puts other people down and he doesn't see anything wrong with that. And so helping him consider exactly like you started to do in the intake, which was, you know, and I wonder how other people feel about that. I wonder how other people experience that. Focusing on some really basic perspective taking skills to kind of build towards that empathy would be a main one as well. And in addition to maybe helping him figure out how to find actual friends, or maybe start looking at his friends as actual human beings that could be friends. Because I think we can agree that those are not friendships right now.
Yeah.
They could be if he was willing to view them as equals.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. So I was asking, like, do you see yourselves as, do you see them as equals, or do you see yourself as better than them? Because he very clearly sees them as a tool, or as tools to play a role. And you can't have friendships like that. Like, there's, even if the other party has the best intentions, if you don't see them as a human, how can you be friends with them?
Yeah. So, I think it's really clear to highlight this thing that you said of like, even if they have the best intentions, like even just choosing to surround yourself with people because they make you feel good or because we do cool things together, that in and of itself is kind of a surface level idea of friendship. And the most genuine, empathy building, character development way to pursue friendships would be to establish human connections with reciprocal interactions. And so, yes, absolutely, seeing someone as your equal is step one for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, for the short-term goals, I would want to build a good rapport with him. I think that would be really my biggest short-term goal, just because I did notice in the beginning, I asked him about his values, his dad's values versus his values. Had he ever considered it? And immediately like shut it down. So now I know that that's not really something we can touch on right now. Like, that's not something that he would be open to yet. And so for me, it would be building rapport. Honestly, with him, I think I'd really have to build credibility with him for him to even consider anything that I'm saying. And then so that would be really my short-term goal. I think long-term, I would want to point out because there are many opportunities to do this, point out when he says things that are hurtful or that can be hurtful. Saying something like, you wouldn't get it, no offense. It's not going to hurt me because I'm a therapist. Like you're, a teen. It's not going to hurt me. And it might hurt your peers. Like your peers might be hurt hearing that. And you really, truly might not mean any offense by it because you just see it as like a logical thing. And yet it's hurtful. And so because there were many times when that happened in the intake. And so because I know that there would be many opportunities, that's something that long-term would be a goal, is just like, let's pause, you said this and that could be really hurtful. Why do you think that could be hurtful? Just reflecting on that and then building skills. So I would say DBT skills, interpersonal. So I use DBT a lot, dialectical behavior therapy. I would want to teach him some interpersonal effectiveness skills and some emotion regulation skills. So he says that the thing that he wants to do is maybe control his anger. Actually, that's one thing I would do in the short term, is helping him be able to control and notice anger so that he doesn't lash out. I think that would build credibility with him if he could use that and be like, oh, okay, that helped. Now I'm not, offending everybody. They shouldn't be offended, but I'm not offending them anymore. And then after I have that credibility and rapport with him, then I would start to, in session, challenge some of the things that he says and help him hopefully gain some better communication skills. I also long-term would want to work with him on better understanding his own views and just questioning, because he's at that age, like you were talking about Erickson, he's at that age to start forming his own self, his own person. And I would want to just throw in some Socratic questions in there and just start getting him to question other people's views and do those views align with what he actually thinks. So I think those are some of the things that I would want to work with him on.
I think that makes a lot of sense. There were specific points that you brought up that I was going to elaborate on, but I forgot. Also, it's okay.
Yeah. And the friendship thing is really important too.
Yeah.
Working on building better friendships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of a consistent long-term pattern of working on recognizing that feeling superior to others does not have to be the only way that you feel good in this world. And you can have positive feelings that come from your own sense of accomplishment, your own drives and motivations, and work on things that you want to work on, and establishing genuine connections with other people as opposed to trying to feel superior to them all the time, because that's going to be a very short-lived high, and it's not going to continue to feel good, especially when things come up in life that inevitably do, because no one person stays on top forever. So dealing with those kinds of changes, maybe moving towards a more flexible perspective as opposed to having really rigid ideas of what is good and right and okay and enjoyable, would start to be my long-term goals for him. I think eventually we would also need to get to some family sessions, whether I refer him out to also be in a family therapy setting, or whether I invite, his parents in for parent sessions and we kind of collaborate on that. But I think it would absolutely come to a matter of how are we treating each other? How are we supporting each other genuinely as individual human beings, as opposed to just like, we all know how his father is just trying to mold a little mini me out of him, and emphasizing that support that can lead to a better drive for internal validation, as opposed to him just constantly trying to get any kind of validation only from praise, approval from his father, or feeling superior to others. And I think working on that pattern would resolve a lot of the other stuff that he does as well, but it would be one of the very long-term things, I think, eventually bring his family in, because I completely agree with what you said, that there's a lot of things he's not at this moment ready to unpack. And like, it would be about building a lot of trust with him, building a lot of really the ability to believe that he could be worth exploring, that it's okay to look at his own wants and needs outside of just maintaining this reputation, this family image. And so getting there eventually would open the doors to discussing, is this the most supportive environment? Now, the family is very close and they love each other very much. And there's some hurtful values that they're focusing on, not only towards other people, but also towards themselves and each other. And so working on that, I think, would be really helpful to kind of maintain the little skills that we started with in the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. And definitely agree that there has to be some sort of working with his parents. So maybe even giving them some psychoeducation on parenting styles and growing to have a more authoritative rather than like authoritarian, or the top of my head, moving more toward an authoritative parenting style. And then, yeah, like the family sessions, I think would be a good idea as well.
Yeah. And I'll highlight this just because I always have to have this discussion with my students. It sounds scary, but authoritative parenting is the name that we give in psychology to a parenting style that is more democratic in nature, where it is like not totally dissimilar to other trends you might see online right now, like more gentle parenting or responsive parenting, where the parents are setting clear expectations and guidelines and boundaries and raising their child with intention, and doing so through support and through emotional validation. So a balance of, there are rules, there are expectations, there is also support and comfort. Whereas authoritarian, while it sounds so similar, it's so frustrating that those two are named so similar. I think that's giving authoritative different names, but the authoritarian style is the one where it's all demand, no support. And that's kind of where they are. And we definitely don't want that, because it's going to lead to either intense rebelliousness, which is not what we're seeing with Draco, or it leads to someone being absolutely snuffed out to the point where all they know is like this obedience. And then that bleeds over into other relationships where all they know is how to fit within the rigid expectations. And anything that doesn't fit in that pattern is going to feel completely unacceptable to them. And that is going to affect their mental health, their ability to function, their ability to hold relationships, jobs, those kinds of things. It becomes a problem.
Maybe not. I was going to say, I think the difference is that you can tell that it's coming from a loving place, but I imagine that Draco might be able to tell that his parenting style is coming from a loving place.
Yeah, I really do think that Draco, especially in book 2, I really do think that Draco really believes that his parents love him and that he lives in a loving home. And I think he's right about that.
It's the truth.
Yeah, especially because I'm not worried about this being a spoiler. Like, we all know how this goes, but eventually it does become like they have a limit, and the Malfoys break away from Voldemort. And they don't exactly break away to go help the other side. They do kind of just run off, but it does become really clear that all that matters at the end of the day to them is that they can be together and that they're all okay and safe and together. And that's all that matters to them, which I guess better than being on Voldemort's side. But so they do have that. They just also have other values that align them with extremely harmful dogma and really just violent tendencies that we need to address. But that's just kind of the beauty of exploring these complex and morally gray characters, is that they can be like that, and also they love each other very much. Our socials, would you like to talk about those?
Yes. So we've got Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and we're at Character Clinic Pod on TikTok and Instagram. No spaces, right? Just
Right.
Character Clinic Pod. And then on YouTube, you can just look us up, Character Clinic Podcast, and you'll find us. We would love it if you would follow us, subscribe to our channel. That would be great. And then for my individual social media, I'm at Karla Pineda OCD. I specialize in OCD, and I talk about mental health issues and specifically OCD and anxiety. I give some psychoeducation and do some fun little reels on those. Although I haven't updated in a little while, sometimes I just get stuck. I'm like, oh, I don't have anything to say right now. And then it feels like for a while I won't upload anything. And then all of a sudden I'll upload a lot. Or post a lot. But yeah, those are my socials. I would love for you guys to follow me. How about you?
Yeah, mine are also on Instagram and TikTok. I'm at Counseling with Haley. And we would love for you to reach out if you have like questions or ideas or suggestions or things that you really want to see us talk about. If you have media source suggestions or character suggestions, or you're curious about how we would handle a certain situation in the therapy office, like I think it would be really fun to be able to take on a lot of additional ideas for where this is going. So feel free to send us messages, comment on our stuff, and we're pretty active on those. So we'll definitely get back to you.
Yeah, and we'd be open to adding things to the podcast, like a question and answer section or a question of the week section, things like that. So definitely open to any kind of suggestions.